What's up everybody, it's your boy, Unfortunate Schmelting Accident, and in this video, I'm going to show you how you can break Elden Ring using a weapon that is very near and dear to my heart, Ordovis' Greatsword. Now this weapon is probably my favorite weapon in the entire game, and for me, it completely beats every other weapon I've featured thus far in the Breaking Elden Ring series for my #1 spot. Now the Greatsword class is already one of the more popular groups of weapons in the game, but the secret sauce that sets Ordovis' Greatsword apart from the rest of the pack is the unique skill, Ordovis' Vortex. More on that in a minute. Found in Ori's Hero's Grave in Altus Plateau, this weapon is hidden behind the dungeon that requires you to platform onto narrow walkways, slay several skeletons that don't know when to quit, give a fire-breathing pillar an erection, get your spine broken from some stone chariots, successfully destroy the chariots, and then die on your first attempt at the boss because the fucking chariots made you use up all of your heals before you even got in there. As you can probably tell by my stats and the fact that I have the weapon already in this gameplay, I recorded this footage post-game. In order to obtain Ordovis' Greatsword, you must defeat him in battle along with one of his compatriots. This fight is normally pretty tough at the level you would normally be at in Altus, but you are rewarded handsomely for defeating them. Not only do you get the sword, but you get the Crucible armor set along with it. Now, before we get into the run, let me break down why this weapon falls into the game-breaking category if you're not familiar with it already. I briefly mentioned it earlier, but it all starts with a unique skill, Ordovis' Vortex. I touched on what I feel makes the weapons game-breaking in my last video where I covered the Milady, but generally speaking, the best weapons either have ludicrously powerful unique skills, or the weapon allows you to build around multi-hit or charged attack builds. Ordovis' Greatsword is one of the best, if not the best, stance-breaking weapon in the entire game. When fully charged, you do 66 stance damage, which is already crazy enough, and when combined with the Stone-Barbed Crack tier, you'll deal over 80 stance damage, which basically means everything in the game gets staggered off of 1 or 2 fully charged Ashes of War. The only downside is that the unique skill is kinda short-ranged, but honestly, everything else outweighs that single negative, in my opinion. With all that being said, let's get into the run and see just how busted this weapon can get. The first step in the run is to acquire the weapon. Shocker, I know. For that to happen, I spent days of my free time researching various routes to come up with the most efficient strategy and pathway to the weapon. It was a monumental task that would require me to traverse huge swaths of the map. Armed with only my trusty club, I'd have to set out on this journey of a lifetime without knowing whether I'd triumph or die trying.
Hello there.
I'm not cheating, you're cheating. Oh wow, look at that, an America's rune that's gonna let me level up to meet the stat requirements. Oh man, that's some crazy luck right there. After stepping out into the Chapel of Anticipation and observing my character's stellar physique, I failed horribly at my first attempt at combat with my trusty weapon. Hours later, I lay damn near balls-ass naked in an underground pond, drifting in and out of consciousness with little to no recollection of the night before. I was jostled by the mythical being known as the Haunts. And as I regained my senses, I discovered the Haunts was accompanied by a robed, fair-skinned woman. Even in my hapless state, I sensed her warmth and her beauty. In a situation like this, I could do only one thing. Get my ass up and run as far the fuck away from that woman as humanly possible. She made eye contact with me and I got nervous. Yeah, baby, that's what I'm talking about. This is what peak male performance looks like. Alright, now let me just move the camera a bit so my shoulders are kind of lined up with the door frame. Alright, there we go. Of course, with me being the dumbass that I am, I popped the Marika's rune at the first sight of grace, checked the weapon stat requirements, and forgot that I can't level up until I get to the Gatefront ruin site of grace. So I made a beeline for the site of grace, made a pit stop to murder this Godric soldier, stole the clothing off his back like an absolute mad lad, and then continued my beeline to the site of grace, where, as I rested my legs, I was greeted by the mysterious robed woman who I narrowly escaped in the cave earlier that day. She gave me the keys to her Lamborghini and finally allowed me to upgrade my stats to the point where I could wield Ordovis' Greatsword. Then I allowed the camp of soldiers to kill me once, so I dropped the spare runes, and after coming back to life and taunting them, allowed them to kill me a second time, so the spare runes were lost for good. Prior to taking on Morgot, I went on the usual pre-game item gathering routine that included the Axe Talisman, some golden seeds, first half of the Dectus Medallion, Sacred Tears, Flask of Wondrous Wumbo, simple and yet effective crystal tears, more golden seeds, and the soul of a vulgar militiaman. It used to be tradition on the channel to bully at least one of these cretins in a video, and I think it's time to bring it back. Eventually, I made my way to Fort Faroth so I could gather the second half of the Dectus Medallion. I thought I could be cool and kill the basement rats after grabbing Radagon's Sword Seal, but alas, I did not have it in me. With all that dilly-dallying out of the way, it was time to face off against the Malakth of Udex Gundyrs, Morgot the Fellowman. While I will always hold the opinion that you should never underestimate any of the main bosses in this game, I was confident I'd be able to take out Morgot very easily enough in this encounter.
Are you sure about that?
In order to avoid any further embarrassment, I set off to find Patches' bitch ass, where for the first time in his pathetic life, the scammer himself indeed got scammed. At least he's mature enough to understand that he had it coming to him. Then I headed back to the gate front ruins to grab the flail, and then, wait, wrong chest. After actually grabbing the flail, I used it for its only purpose in the game, to kill Grail on her own turf in Dragonburrow, so I could get a healthy amount of runes, which allowed me to purchase Morgot's Shackle and make myself slightly less killable than before. While my runes laying on the ground in front of me are an indication that I was much more killable than I thought, one thing is for sure, even without upgrading the weapon, I was doing an immense amount of damage thanks to Morgot's Shackle. Even when taking into account that damn near every boss in the base game has some type of holy resistance, I was satisfied with how painless Morgot's fight started out. Sure, this probably would have been a one cycle if I went ahead and did the early upgrade path for Somber Smithing Stones, but I wanted to keep the run somewhat representative of how you would start out with a Somber weapon. Or maybe that was just an excuse I drummed up after not being able to do the Somber 7 skip in Volcano Manor, but we'll get to that later. The fight was fine. Everything was fine. I'm not panic rolling, you're panic rolling. For how much I was glazing the stance damage, I didn't get any staggers outside of the first two that I showed, which kind of bummed me out. Regardless, I was finally able to take care of Morgot after more attempts than I feel like sharing. I literally feel more comfortable fighting Promise Consort Radahn than I do fighting Morgot, but that's just because I'm a weirdo, I guess. After defeating Morgot, I went around the map collecting various doodads and knickknacks, starting with the Strength Knot tier, a Somber Smithing Stone 1 from Morn Tunnel, the Soul of the Scaly Misbegotten from Morn Tunnel, the Opaline Bubble tier from the Weeping Pincinel Erdtree Avatar, which I don't think I even used once, and after getting diddled by a crab in this corner of this beach, I actually found the Somber 2 that I was looking for. After upgrading Ordovis' Greatsword to +2, it was time to head into Stormvale Castle and take the easy route through the main gate. Before taking on Godric, I adjusted my physic pairing to include the Strength Knot tier and the Spiked Crack tier. Godric is easily the biggest pushover out of all the Remembrance bosses, but there are still some valuable tips to take away from the fight regarding the typical playstyle with Ordovis' Greatsword. The first thing I'd say is that even though you'll be really tempted to spam the balls off of fully charged skills, that doesn't really become viable until you get the vigor and endurance up a little bit. As you can see, you're going to be trading a lot with enemies and bosses with this weapon. That's the trade-off you get for having such high poison stance breaking potential. And generally speaking, you should have a decent amount of endurance and vigor by the time you get to Altus Plateau in a normal playthrough, but since I'm at like 15 endurance right now, I can typically only get off 2 skills in a row before I have to regenerate my stamina. Not only that, I have to pay close attention to how much health I'm losing at this stage. Because I didn't have access to many defensive buffs yet, I had to use the charged skill sparingly. No matter what weapon or sets of spells you're using, none of that matters without a little bit of game knowledge. You don't need to have every bit of the fight planned out and have a boss's poise meter calculated down to the nearest decimal like how Gino Machino does his no-hit runs, but you should either be comfortable enough to know which punish windows are longer than others, or do some experimenting and see what works for different weapons. Take this sequence of Godric's fight, for example. I know that typically after he does his 3 big slams, he has a bit of a cooldown animation, but it's not long enough to get off a fully charged Ash of War without risking bodily harm. So I got in a jump attack followed by a light attack, then I got out of there to wait for a better attack. Thankfully, he started winding up his tornado roll thingamajig, so that immediately sets off the signal in my brain to start charging Ordovis' Vortex as soon as I come out of the dodge roll. I may have gotten my booty cheeks lit on fire, and I may have come within an inch or two of death, but ultimately, Godric serves as nothing more than a helpful assistant for me to explain to all of you in the audience how to approach this weapon if you haven't ever used it before. After defeating Godric, it was time to head into the most action-packed area of the game, Liurnia of the Lakes. Yeah, they should probably rename this area to just Horseback Riding Simulator. After yoinking the Academy key from the protection of Smaragd, I jogged into Raya Lucaria where I found a somber 3 behind this little wall right here. I am now realizing that the route I took to upgrade the weapon and grab my various buffs and talismans made no damn sense whatsoever and was extremely lacking in cohesion and flow. Taking the trap chest in the Dragon Burnt Ruins to Cerulean Crystal Tunnel was definitely something I could have done earlier. But anyways, that's where I picked up a Somber 4, and then I headed back to Raya Lucaria where I would become acquainted with the sweet embrace of death. Upon reviving in the chambers beneath Diddy's mansion, I attempted to make my escape and perhaps conveniently stumble across a Somber Smithing Stone 6 in the process. It appears as though I may have misunderstood the directions on the wiki, because I could not figure out how the hell I was supposed to navigate this area of Volcano Manor. I must admit, I don't normally do this in my runs. I was able to find the Abductor version duo, which is cool, I guess. You know, it's not like this whole detour turned into one giant waste of time or anything. After giving up on grabbing these Somber 6 and 7 that good Elden Ring players can easily obtain, I decided to take the lift to Altus Plateau, which not only triggers the Radahn Festival for later, but for now, allowed me to regain some dignity. I headed over to Altus Tunnel, got sniped in the back by someone who wasn't man enough to fight me face to face, retrieved a Somber 5, clapped some Crystallian cheeks, then headed back to the round table so I could upgrade Ordovis' Greatsword to +5. This is the point in the run where we start to get closer to being fully kitted out for the weapon. Defeating this Liurnia Erdtree avatar rewards you with 3 different elemental physic tiers, but the only one we care about for this run is the Holy Shroud and Crack tier, granting us a big boost to, you guessed it, our holy damage. I wanted to fight Rennala next, and that meant having to go through the Red Wolf of Radagon first. Oddly enough, this turned into a small roadblock for me. See, the Red Wolf of Radagon moves very fast and is a very skinny enemy compared to most bosses, which means sometimes you'll miss the mark a little bit when you try to use the Ash of War. Most of the time though, you'll be able to rip off a sizable chunk of damage from him. However, I completely misjudged what attack he was going for next, and as you can imagine, it did not work out very well for me. I redeemed myself the second time around though. It's the Red Wolf we're talking about here after all. After showing Moongrum who his daddy is, I made my way into the wondrous Grand Library at the top of the Academy, where I nearly got my toes sucked on against my will by an average art major. Phase 1 Rennala isn't really ever an issue unless you're doing some type of low level run or obscenely restrictive challenge run. However, it should be noted that with my current setup, I could not cycle her first phase. But after drinking my physic and getting her down to phase 2, I was bamboozled and perhaps even Speckledorfed by one of the easier bosses in the game. I mistimed an Ash of War and I got annihilated by the slowest magic projectiles known to mankind. Not exactly my finest moment in my YouTube career, but let this serve as a warning to not take anything in this game for granted. Luckily for me, things went a bit more in my favor next time around. I was able to take out almost half of Rennala's HP from my first 2 attacks, and after dealing with a few minutes worth of the usual spammy bullshit followed by 1 or 2 punishes, I was able to beat Rennala without much of a hassle. I couldn't really show off the power of the weapon too much in that fight, but I'm just going to chalk that one up to this just being a fight that's an overall pain in the ass compared to others. With Rennala beaten, it was time to get arguably the most important talisman of the run. Right next to the Grand Lift of Dectus is the Golden Lineage Everjail, which contains the Timu version of Godric, Godefroy the Grafted. Even though Godefroy's name is completely unfortunate, the reward you get from this fight is anything but. The Godfrey icon boosts the power of fully charged spells and skills by 15%, making this a no-brainer in our talisman setup going forward for the rest of the game. Continuing on from that, I went around and collected more upgrades for the weapon, starting with a Somber 6 that I forgot you can get from the Cerulean Crystal Tunnel Falling Star Beast. And then I chopped some trees down in Eastern Caelid because the lumber industry on this side of the map is booming and pays a lot better than in most other areas. Besides getting 91,000 runes, the Opaline Hard tier and Stonebarb Crack tier are 2 tiers you should definitely run all the time in a build with Ordovis' Greatsword. Finally, I headed over yonder to grab a Somber 8 from this exploding Scarab, and then I grabbed the Somber 9 from this low down area just in front of the Divine Tower of Caelid. I didn't need any other physic tiers for the rest of the run, and I only needed 1 more Somber 7 to get my weapon up to +9, but I still had to grab a few more buffs that I definitely should have gotten earlier. The first being Flame Grant Me Strength, and then the Golden Vow Ash of War, as at this point in the run I was still lacking in the Faith department and I didn't have the stats for the incantation. With the impassable Great Bridge being perfectly passable during the Radahn Festival, I could easily enter Redmane Castle in spite of the lag spikes my PC was experiencing. While part of me is sad that I never got to experience cheesing Star Scourge Radahn's Phase 2 by sending him into the ocean, I'm happy we can all still avoid his initial arrow barrage. It took me a minute to wait for an ideal punish window, but when I did, I was really happy with what I was able to reply with. I was then reminded that no matter how many hours I put into this game, I still fall victim to the occasional panic healing. I'm only human. I got behind Radahn as he charged up his Cragblade boosted shockwave, and unfortunately for Leonard, he was taking the brunt of my counterattacks. I got off another uncharged Ash of War and was hoping I'd be near a stance break, but I got a little unlucky and charged up another Vortex just as Radahn ran away. Right here, I kind of goofed up a little bit and I went for a jump attack when I probably should have just held my horses a little bit longer. I didn't get punished though, as I was able to sneak behind Radahn and hit him with a back-breaking Ash of War before he leapt away for his second phase. Don't make a 9/11 joke, don't make a 9/11 joke, do not make a 9/11 joke, don't make a 9/11. Phase 2 went by in a flash on account of the RNG I got. After getting off a jump attack, I had the opportunity to pretty much stand still and charge up Ordovis' Vortex, which just chunked Radahn's health. After that, I was once again visited by RNGesus and landed a second consecutive Ash of War, which may or may not have also staggered him if I didn't wind up killing him outright. It was at this point at the end of the Radahn festival where I realized I had forgotten something very, very important for the build. So, after a short conversation, I convinced Alexander that I needed his Jar Shard in order to become Elden Lord and to expand my YouTube empire. The final thing I needed to do before heading back to Altus was grab a Somber Smithing Stone 7, as my lack thereof kept me from having a +9. So after swiftly taking care of Loretta's Shade in 3 hits, I paid a visit to 2022's Rule 34 runner-up in Ranni so I could advance her quest line. There's a Somber 7 in the section of Ainsel River, near where you pick up her doll later in her quest. Before I could get there though, I had to face my inner demons, aka myself. Chaotic Evil Flock of Turtles was no match for the Ideal Citizen / Timely Taxpayer Flock of Turtles. And after the Mimic Tier fight, it's just some item fetching and carrying inverted statue reception. I finally made it to the Ainsel River main, and at this point I could grab Miniature Ranni and reward all of my efforts with some diabolical actions that may or may not involve Ranni and a small jar. If you know, you know. Just downstream from the site of Grace is the Old Palace Ruins, and a malformed star that you may be familiar with if you've ever done Ranni's quest. If you've always been the type to ignore the malformed star, understandable first of all, but you've been missing out on a free Somber 7 from this guy. If it wasn't broken already, being at +9 will be the cherry on top. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've all been waiting for. There are just so many times while playing this game that you just can't help but to stop and admire the scenery. This is not one of those times. The Lake of Rot is what happens when a guy whose diet consists of White Monster and Celeste pizzas attempts to have a baby with a white woman with dreadlocks. Both sets of DNA are so polluted and doomed for failure that Mother Nature is like, yeah, no, that's okay. I appreciate the effort, but absolutely fucking not. Whoa, what is this? Astel, natural born of the void and a flock of turtles video? Somebody pinch me, I must be dreaming. One thing I wasn't dreaming about was my damage output. Good God, that's a lot for one jump attack. Tell you what though, I definitely regret not fighting Astel on my past few runs. I kinda forgot like half of his moveset during the fight. For the most part, I just stayed in front of him and aimed for the head. If I didn't make direct contact with the Ash of War, Astel is big enough that I would almost always benefit from the Ash of War's splash damage. After dodging a grab attack, I staggered Astel with a jumping heavy attack. Instead of taking the riposte, I ripped off another chunk of his health with an Ash of War before losing another chunk of my own health. Alright dude, I get it. You're the one who wiped out the dinosaurs and you want the credit. It's fine, you don't need to show off. Astel may be a legend in his own right, but he is no match for the legendary power of Ordovis' Greatsword. I was very happy to beat him on my first try since I hadn't fought him for a very long time. After beating Astel, it was time to head into Leyndell to advance my game progress. But first, I had to sneak around the Draconic Tree Sentinel and get in position. The objectively easiest way in the game to kill DTS is to sneak behind him and spam Poison Mist until he dies. However, the most satisfying way to kill him is by absolutely bullying him with Ordovis' Greatsword. Because I am mentally deficient in some capacity, I could not dodge a very simple attack and lost a hitless boss victory. But it didn't matter to me. You all saw what I just did to that man and to his horse. Unbelievable. Before making my way to Morgot, I had to pay my beloved Gillica a visit and beat the brakes off her real quick. I don't normally condone violence against women, but she was guarding the ritual sword talisman, so the Godfrey Shade went about as well as it normally does. I may or may not have almost died, but like I said, sometimes you just have to accept the fact that you're going to be trading damage a lot with this weapon. More often than not, you'll come out on top. Here is a stat spread alert for those of you who are interested. With all the story and lore expansion that we got involving Omens and the Crucible from Shadow of the Erdtree, I was really hoping Morgot would have somehow gotten more love shown to him in the DLC with some extra information. His story is the most tragic and beautiful out of any character in this game, in my opinion, and his boss battle is one of those fights that feels like both characters are truly fighting for their opposite truths. Gameplay-wise, this is one of the easiest fights in the whole damn game if you walk in here with Morgot Shackle. However, I did technically mess up a little bit here, as I did too much damage and took him down to phase 2 without capitalizing on both Shackle uses in phase 1. The thrones may be stained with his curse, but the arena would be stained with his blood. Upon further inspection, most of that blood was probably my blood. Now, even though Morgot turns into a crackhead in phase 2, that didn't stop me from hitting back with an Ash of War whenever I got the chance. You have to think on the fly against Morgot, but luckily for me, I got 2 pretty long punish windows in a row, so I was able to finish off the fight with a big old bonk from my sword. With Morgot now defeated, the game now becomes much more linear, and the little female companionship we already have is about to disappear. More like mountain slop of the giants, am I right? Before I fought the fire giant, I stopped by Castle Sol because I heard there was an open house here. I guess the owners forgot to notify me they take care of exotic animals, which I don't really have a problem with, you know, I just wish they would have told me, but I decided I wasn't interested in the property. They were asking for way too much money considering the location. Normally, Commander Nile is one of the more predictable bosses in the game. However, there is one flaw in that assertion. I suck at this game. I was just having one of those days against Nile, but eventually I got my act together. Each attempt started the same way, with me flattening the Banished Knights before getting Commander Nile stuck in a perpetual feedback loop of jumping and poking and taking damage. The best bit of damage I got in the fight was after Nile did his frosty swirly gig. He's an old ass man, so this attack takes a lot out of him. That gave me the opportunity to stance break the balls off of him and get a little bit of chip damage as he was regaining his senses. Now from that point on, the fight was pretty much a standard Nile fight. I really wanted to end on a charged Ash of War, and I would have if the Ritual Sword Talisman boost was active, but my little misstep made me exercise a bit of patience. It goes a long way in a game like this. With the first half of the Haligtree Medallion acquired, it was time to take on the Fire Giant, where oddly enough, I had a much easier time fighting compared to Commander Nile. I dodged a mountain's worth of snow, which of course is very realistic for a guy like me to pull off, and then I got to work on Fire Giant's ankle. Even though Miyazaki's alleged foot fetish is one of the most iconic gaming memes, as a former soccer player, I completely understand his decision to make Fire Giant's weak point his ankles. At this stage of my life, I can't even run like half a mile without both of my ankles flaring up. With a couple more hits, I got Fire Giant down to phase 2, where I managed to get a clutch stagger from attacking his hand. I went for a risky play and targeted his eyeball with an Ash of War, but it paid dividends for me. After getting fucking jump scared by a leftover phase 1 fire orb, I just sat back and let the Fire Giant throw a temper tantrum while I reapplied my buffs and got back into peak fighting condition. I get that the Fire Giant is supposed to be this humongous spectacle of a boss battle, but the fact that he can just drop everything and roll his big ass body towards you at any moment kinda sucks. I have no idea how much poise Fire Giant has in phase 2 compared to when you have the weak point in phase 1 available, but based on my mental math I was doing during the fight, I concluded I was nowhere near close to another stagger. But at the end of the day, staggers don't really matter if you just straight up kill the enemy that you're fighting. That was one of the more painless Fire Giant fights that I've had. All thanks must be given to Ordovis' Greatsword. And after I reached the forge, I leveled up with Melanina one last time before she did her best Richard Pryor impersonation. According to my analytics, most of my audience is typically above the age of 18, so hopefully some of you out there understand that joke. After waking up in an area that would make for a sick campaign mission in Call of Duty, I traveled farther down into the structure and realized that I can never truly escape the Godskin duo no matter how hard I try. Everything started off normal in the first attempt. Both of them were asleep, I staggered the fat one, but then I underestimated my ability to fuck things up. Yeah, after making a mistake like that, I didn't really deserve anything from that attempt. I only gathered 3 cracked pots on my journey, so I knew I'd have to make each throw count. Luckily, the Godskin Apostle didn't sidestep my second sleep pot, so it was time for me to get to work. Last time I made the mistake of not taking the riposte, so that was the most obvious correction I needed to make on the second attempt. The Godskin Noble was immediately brought to phase transition again, but I knew I had enough time to charge an Ash of War before I got ass slammed by him. Because I am a regular viewer of Gino Machinima's no-hit runs on YouTube, I took a second to reapply my buffs before attacking the Apostle. I'm a big fan of things that are easy, mostly because of my crippling fear of failure and my desire to be competent at everything I do immediately, which really makes me wonder how the hell I stuck around playing this game for so long, but then again, I'm also stubborn as shit too. If only those 2 wolves inside of me could explain how the hell this sleep pot didn't put the Godskin Noble to sleep right here, unless there's some kind of sleep race period. I think I just got scammed. But it didn't really matter too much because the chunky half of the Foreskin brothers decided to summon his little buddy back, and that gave me more than enough time to end this man's whole career with a charged Ash of War. After the Godskin duo was sent to HE double hockey sticks, I leveled up my faith to 20 and my strength to 49. I was only planning on getting the 25 faith just so I could use the Golden Vow incantation. Doesn't really make sense to level faith over strength for damage purposes with the weapon. Now Malakth was one of my favorite bosses in the base game, but for some reason this run he was really breaking my balls. This death pretty much captures what happened in every failed attempt I had. I'd charge up the Ash of War, but then I'd completely whiff and get caught up in his 10,000 knives destined death jujitsu attack. Now whatever was happening to me against Commander Nile had stuck me on Malakth for over an hour. Eventually, I came to the conclusion that I needed to swallow my pride and stop spamming the Ash of War, especially in Phase 1. I really only had enough time for uncharged variations, and most of the time, my punish windows came from countering his Beast Claw AoE with a jump attack. Malakth and the Beast Clergyman really exposed the one weakness with the weapon that I will readily admit. Mobile enemies really restrict your Ash of War opportunities. After getting Malakth down to Phase 2, I got an opening sequence that was basically useless for me, so I couldn't get a counterattack in until he got stuck behind one of the damaged pillars and conveniently landed right in front of me. I died so many times to that destined death attack that I could almost smell it coming at this point. I was also very frustrated that I died so many times to Malakth, so a lot of my brain power is being taken away from focusing on the game and was being used to calm my ass down. The main thing that was frustrating me outside of my deaths was the fact that I rarely saw any staggers in Phase 2 because I had just a hard time landing the Ash of War. However, the timing on this stagger was impeccable, and instead of taking the riposte, I wanted Malakth to experience the pain of what he's been missing out on for all of these attempts thus far. To the victor, go the spoils, and in addition to advancing the game, I went back to the round table and I bought Malakath's armor set. Before I went any further, I had to go back to Farum Azula because I realized I never got the somber ancient dragon smithing stone from the area behind the ancient dragon. That probably could have made a difference in a few of those failed Malakth attempts. So, after I maxed out Ordovis' Greatsword to plus 10, finally, I paid Sir Gideonoff a visit. And then, I went back to Mount Gelmir, and I picked up the Golden Vow incantation. Godfrey was next on the list, but we'll just pretend like I didn't get slammed into the lower mantle of the earth. Normally, I don't show large, unedited portions of a boss fight for the sake of time, but I believe my actions in Godfrey's first phase were very worthy of showcasing exactly how they happened. The power of Ordovis' Greatsword was definitely being showcased, but this was simply a very good Godfrey attempt that wound up being hitless. After my first failed attempt, I adopted the same mentality as the Malakth fight, and I used the Ash of War much more sparingly than in other fights. I got some solid RNG this time around, and mostly saw Golden Godfrey shade attacks from the main man himself. I don't claim to be the greatest Elden Ring player on YouTube, but I've been around the block a few times and I know a thing or two by now. After I countered his dash stomp with a jumping light attack, I hit him with a quick Ash of War, which got me the stance break and riposte that I was looking for. Even though I've beaten Elden Ring and the DLC multiple times now, Hoaraloo still scares the shit out of me. He is the embodiment of an Elden Ring boss in every way. Did I have to pick and choose my opportunities a little bit more? And did I do a bit more running than attacking in his second phase? You're damn right. But if a 15-foot monstrosity of a man covered in the blood of a spectral tiger that got torn to shreds by his bare hands came running at you, you'd probably be doing the same. Stuff like this is the reason why this dude terrifies me. I'm over here thinking I could get off a crumb of damage with the Ash of War, and he's like, nah, I'm actually gonna make your insides your outsides now. While I couldn't carry my hitless attempt into phase 2, I do know that I was still carried by Ordovis' Greatsword in the fight. 10 out of 10. Would recommend the weapon. My summary of the Radabeast fight is as follows. The weapon did what it was supposed to do, but sometimes I did not. As you've seen a million times by now, the Ash of War is the showstopper with the weapon, but it was actually the jump attacks that got me the first stagger. Just kind of worked out that way. While Radagon was dazed and confused, I hit him with another charged vortex of the Ordovis variety. And after that, he tried to dunk on me, to which I said, fuck out of here, dickhead, and tore off more of his health bar with another Ash of War. I didn't get another stagger in the fight, but it didn't really matter because I had some simple attacks to deal with before taking the fight to phase 2. I definitely approached the Elden Beast from a completely unoptimized point of view, but I feel like doing a bunch of math and planning out an elaborate buffing routine before each fight kind of takes the fun out of it. I didn't get a stagger on the opening 2 attacks, but after dodging Elden Beast's 3-piece combo sword with a side of Exalted Flesh, I got the stagger I was looking for. If I had more FP in the tank, maybe I would have tried to sneak in 2 fully charged Ashes of War instead of settling for the riposte, but either way, I took away half of his health without breaking a sweat. Unfortunately, it was just a normal Elden Beast fight after that. I had to settle for chip damage most of the time, and when I wasn't jumping over rings or nearly getting pranked by the arena barrier, I was dodging through mile-wide waves of holy damage just to get a sniff of Elden Beast bathwater because I'm a certified freak and that's how I operate, baby. I'm not kidding when I say I was averaging at least a minute between damage opportunities. Like, seriously, is all this bullshit really necessary? Oh wow, finally a chance for me to do some damage. Surely I won't almost fucking die. Elden Beast, NFC East, suck my schmeat, flock of turtles in 4, baby. Oh wow, Marik's hammer. I wonder if the Gold Breaker skill could do a breaking of the Elden Ring. Now that the base game is technically beaten, it's time for me to do the other Remembrance bosses that are worthy of my time. And for those of you who are wondering, the answer is no. Fortis Axe and Regal Ancestor Spirit are not worth my time. I have no clue how I didn't get absolutely cooked by Placidusax's Fire Breath right here, but I've learned never to ask questions when the game throws something in your favor. Regardless, that gave me my first crack at a charged Ash of War, and I must say I was impressed. After fleeing the fire again, I dashed back in tailside and charged up another Ash of War for the Dragon Lord. I even gave him a little smack as a stocking stuffer. And by smack, I do not mean Black Tar. That doesn't seem like an ideal gift for the holidays. Instead, I gave him something better. Brain damage. With Placidusax firmly in phase 2, it was time for me to deal with this nonsense again. Not only could I not hit him with rolling light attacks, but I once again fell victim to the other Claw Slam variant that still gives me nightmares. I was getting pretty decent RNG though. The only thing you can really ask for out of the fight is for the Dragon Lord to keep the Disappearing Act bullshit to a minimum. And I got gifted some solid opportunities on a regular basis. I did get caught pretty close to him during his frickin' laser beams though. But you know what? It didn't matter because I'm a fucking psycho and I jumped over one of the beams while I was right next to a pillar of lightning crashing. I mean, after a play like that, it would be remiss of me not to win the fight. So I kept chipping away little by little, sometimes taking a wee bit of damage in the process. But eventually, your boy came out on top and bested the Dragon Lord in his own backyard and in his own place beyond time. I'm nice like that. After that, I finally leveled my health up to a number starting with 4, and then I paid old Albus Dumbledore a visit to chat about the legend of the Haligtree. It seems as though he felt like he could trust me with the other half of the Haligtree medallion. Ah yes. The consecrated snowfield is just fucking lovely this time of year, isn't it? On my way to the Mohgwyn teleporter, I stopped to do a tap dance on this invader's head. And after arriving at Mohgwyn's palace, I stopped to do a bit of rune farming on the Albinaurics. Why? Because fuck you, that's why. It's okay though, I only did it just enough to get my vigor up to 45, okay? I didn't want to overdo it. Funnily enough, I didn't even really need the vigor boost because I absolutely obliterated Mohg on my first try. It's not something that happens often, so you bet your sweet Bippy I'm gonna brag about it from the get-go. I opened up with 2 Ashes of War, then danced with him enough to earn myself a stagger. I've realized now that in situations like this, I should probably take the riposte since his wake-up animation would have given me enough time for another Ash of War, but regardless, I couldn't manage to get another stagger to cancel his phase transition. He did make me bleed my own blood, but I was still doing a ton of damage to him with each hit. As per usual, there were times where I did have to trade with him, but after enough Ash of War spamming, I was able to sneak in a cheeky jump attack to secure the victory and gain access to the DLC. I forgot that you get a ton of runes from this fight, so I rounded out my mind to 20 and boosted my strength a bit more. Before the DLC, I needed to take a detour to see an old friend, so I went around Ordina lighting the braziers as I went, and even whooped the Black Knife Assassin with the help of the Sentry Torch in my offhand. I forgot this item even existed. And at the final brazier I was greeted with an awkward situation. But in true Flock of Turtles fashion, I ran in full tilt like an absolute madland and was not punished for my tomfoolery. Loretta, Knight of the Haligtree, is fucking dead. From this point forward in the run, the setup for the weapon isn't really changing much in terms of talismans or physic tiers that cover damage output. However, there is one talisman I completely forgot to pick up that would have massively helped me out, especially in this fight. So even though I did not pick it up or equip it at any point in the run, I want to give a shout out to the Dragoncrest Great Shield Talisman as a fantastic 4th slot alternative to Radagon's Source who wants you to get at the point where you don't really need that talisman anymore. And yeah, after a dozen or so failed Millennia attempts, it still didn't register in my mind that I was completely missing out on a lot of survivability. But in the end, it didn't matter because I cooked up something quite exquisite for the winning attempt. The opening of the fight really set the pace for me. I was coming off the back of about an hour's worth of failed attempts at this point, so I was playing kinda tilted and threw all of my game knowledge out the window in favor of full-on Oonga Boonga L2 spam. This type of mentality almost got me in phase 2 without even having to dodge an attack. But then the classic wake-up insta-waterfowl sliced me up within an inch of my life. But from there, it didn't really take much to get Millennia down to her second phase. That phase 1 was pretty ridiculous thanks to Ordovis' Greatsword, but I didn't think it would be able to carry me like that again. Much like the Milady run, I knew I'd be able to tear off chunks of HP at a time, but I needed to watch out for her hyper armor kicks. I get that Millennia is technically the second hardest boss in the game behind Consort Radahn, and she will definitely go down in gaming history as a top 10 most difficult boss fight across every game ever. But holy hell can she stall with the best of them. Anyways, after I was finally able to get a hit in, oh yes, like you thought, after I was finally able to string a couple of hits together, a moment of magic happened that was so magical that Disney might try to hit this video with a copyright claim. Millennia really tried to come at me with that weak sauce, but little did she know that I'm packing a cheat code in my strong hand. Ordovis' vortex brought her to her knees, and after taking the riposte, I wound up another vortex and sent her bitch ass back to the Shadow Realm. Not too shabby, if I do say so myself. Speaking of the Shadow Realm, it was time to head there myself, with the first goal being to gather up enough Scadu fragments to get me to a high enough level before going stir crazy. Like usual, I wound up in front of the Dancing Lion first, this time at Scadu level 9. At this point in the run, I anticipated I would have to change up my playstyle a little bit considering the DLC bosses are very unrelenting and don't really give you room to breathe. The Dancing Lion would be the litmus test for the second half of the run. And it was quite the litmus test indeed. I was out of heals during his frost phase, and instead of waiting it out like a sane person, my dumbass decided to go for broke. It took me a couple more tries, but with a bit of favorable RNG, I laid down a straight ass whooping. I don't know what the difference would be between a straight ass whooping and a gay ass whooping, but you know what, I'm not even going to try to go there because I just got monetized like 2 weeks ago, and I'm not trying to get my channel nuked already. But anyway, I landed a direct hit with a charged Ash of War, and after the riposte, I took away half of Homeboy's health, which was sick. After that, I dealt with the bullshit from Dancing Lion's Lightning phase, pre-jacked an Ash of War in the Stormwind phase, hit a pretty sick Anticipation attack going into his Frost phase, and then ended off the fight with a jump attack. Next up in the DLC was R'hllana because I wanted to keep the boss progression somewhat linear to start off. And I ain't even gonna lie, I got the first time around. I have no clue why I thought that would work, but in the moment, it seemed like a good move. At least it wasn't as bad as the second attempt where I completely choked and fucking died to her atomic teabag. That is very embarrassing. But as they say, all is fair in love and war. And judging by her reaction when I walk in the arena, I can safely say that she's madly in love with me. I mean, that's what it means when a woman tries to harm you, right? I don't really know. I don't have that much experience with them. This clip is so friggin' funny to me watching it back because I cannot understand how the hell I didn't die right here. I refused to dodge because I was just trying to fish for a stagger, and I told myself, I'm either going to stagger her here or I'm going to die trying. And somehow, I survived with a fetus worth of HP and landed a huge stagger and riposte to bring R'hllana down to like 25% of her health. After that, I snuck in and clipped her with an Ash of War, ran back out, clipped her with another Ash of War, and then yet again was blessed by whatever universal all-knowing entity you may believe in, before successfully dodging Miyazaki's balls and nearly choked the damn fight after that. I'm not gonna lie, if I screwed up right there, you probably wouldn't have seen this video for another month because I would have just been beyond pissed and gave up the game for a while. With R'hllana defeated, it was time to slog through the Shadow Keep. I entered through the back, which is my preferred method of entry over the front. Get your mind out the damn gutter, that was not the kind of joke you thought it was. Or was it? In terms of Elden Ring boss fights, Messmer is easily top 5, and depending on the day, he is my #1 favorite boss in the game. I think I've said this in like the last 3 videos I've done, but there's a specific reason why I'm telling you guys this right now. I was getting completely and utterly embarrassed by Messmer in this run. I was repeatedly choking on these fights so hard that I got to the point where I was thinking about switching to playing friggin' Fortnite on the channel instead. But you know what? After the amount of times I played through the game and beaten it, I get a little bit too high on myself sometimes and need to be brought back down to earth. I think that's part of the reason why I love this fight so much. You head into it thinking you're the shit, and nothing can touch you, and next thing you know, you're fighting for your life. Don't get me wrong, I'm still not proud of the gameplay for my winning attempt. It was sloppier than a $20 McSucky from a toothless woman of the night in a Taco Bell parking lot. My opportunities to get off a fully charged Ash of War with Ordovis' Greatsword were extremely limited. Or maybe I'm just an idiot and I could have staggered Messmer like 4 times if I wasn't playing like garbage. I don't really know. But what I do know is that I definitely got scammed out of a lot more damage because I triggered his phase transition cutscene conveniently after landing a fully charged Ash of War. I may have gotten scammed out of a little more damage, but thankfully, I didn't get scammed out of a stagger. I wound up Ordovis' Vortex and landed a charged Ash, finally dealing significant damage when combined with the riposte. And after that, it was pretty much business as usual. Except Messmer didn't really use that many of his snake attacks in this attempt, and I'm not really sure why. Other than this one here that I got clipped by, and this second one right here that wound up being his last action before being smited by my sword, I basically had 2 first phase Messmer attempts back to back. Again, not the cleanest, but I got the job done. After that, I leveled up my strength and vigor a bit more, and then once again realized that Horn Scent is a character that exists, and that once again, I'd have to fight him in a nearer limb. Once I was done with Mesmer, I wanted to do Gaius next. I basically kept dying while trying to figure out how many hits it would take to stagger him, and on the winning attempt, I did not dodge the opening charge. So I can't dodge that one, but I can dodge the one where he just turns on a dime with no warning. I don't get it. This was another one of those fights where I didn't really charge up the Ash of War, even though Commander Gaius is extremely weak to holy damage. I mean, yeah, I could technically do it, but at what cost? Bro hits like a friggin' freight train, and I forgot the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, so I couldn't really hack it. Even on the phase transition, I got disappointed. I was like, yes, surely this is the time I can charge this bad boy up and not be punished. Not only was I not seeing a stagger, I was seeing stars as well. Eventually, his health got so low that I just gave up on the stagger anyway and just focused on winning. I like staying relatively close to Gaius in order to avoid most of his bullshit attacks, and thankfully, I killed him quickly enough that I didn't have to experience any of his gravity tomfoolery. After I collected my winnings at the Scatter Tree Chalice, it was time for me to go from fighting a semi-fun boss to fighting a semi-shit boss in the Scatter Tree Avatar. I say semi-shit because if I walked in here with fire damage, my life would have instantly became 100 times easier, but since I didn't have that, I had to deal with all this nonsense the Avatar loves to throw at me. His thorn moves are shit, his tree trunk moves are shit. Man, I just straight up dislike this boss. There's no other way to put it. Like, look at this absolute joke of a boss. I dodged the same exact way twice, but the second one hits me. It makes no sense. Not only that, but the sheer audacity of this overgrown, rotted, absolute waste of sentient driftwood to use its explosion attack, wake up, and then immediately go for the 3-round burst explosion after goes beyond anything I can comprehend. That shit, like, had me so flustered in the moment that I started panic rolling like a clown. 0 out of 10 boss fight. I don't even care if having fire damage makes it infinitely easier. This shit is just not fun to me whatsoever. And since I like torturing myself, I jumped right into Count Emir's questline next, so I could get this sorry excuse of a quest and Remembrance boss out of the way. I had a plan to make it a bit quicker though. The first part of that plan was to head into the Dragon's Pit and make the ancient Dragon Man wish he was never born. Mission successful. Then I rode behind the Grand Altar of Dragon Communion until I wound up in Charo's hidden grave, and eventually made my way from there into the Cerulean Coast. I just prefer doing it this way. By clearing the Dragon's Pit and the first Jagged Peak Drake before coming this way, you can set yourself up for the road to Bale, do a bit of Emir's quest, and grab a Sight of Grace later if you plan on going back to the Cerulean Coast to fight the Putrescent Knight. You're basically killing 3 birds with one god-tier stone throw. And after that was the usual into the hinterland, grabbing the golden braid, ringing the second bell, finding Count Emir's secret entranceway into the Freak Dungeon, and then enduring never-ending suffering at the hands of a grotesque Lovecraftian horror show. In a game where there are so many different bosses like Elden Ring, I understand that it's highly unlikely I'm going to enjoy every single boss fight that the game has to offer. As the years have gone by, some bosses I've hated in the past, like Horaloo and Malakth, have turned into some of the fights I look forward to the most. However, Metir is simply never going to be one of those bosses. If Metir has 1,000 haters, I'm one of them. If she has 100 haters, you can bet your ass I'm in that crowd too. If she has one singular hater on this earth, I am the last in line. And if she by some miracle has no haters left, I am dead. Oh yeah, let's give her a phase transition AoE that covers the entire friggin' arena because that is exactly what the fans have been asking for. Every once in a while she shows some signs of humanity, or I guess the better way to put it is that sometimes she uses certain moves that indicate that the developers in charge of creating her fight weren't complete and utter psychopaths. I hate this fight so much that every stagger and riposte I get is more satisfying than waking up in the morning and cracking every vertebra in my back. Trying to dodge this bullshit makes me want to start using crack. Yeah man, the less I have to say about Metir, the better. I don't think there's ever going to be a time where I even feel remotely satisfied as a result of this fight. Putrescent Knight went just a bit smoother compared to Metir. I did die once as a result of my own gluttonous greed on a couple of attacks. But he is so weak to holy damage that if you just walk in here with any weapon that deals holy damage, you can almost stumble your way to victory without even really paying attention. You do have to pay attention to his putrescent ghost flame stuff because, well, that does sting a little bit, and for some reason his yelling horse also does damage to you, but this was a much needed palate cleanser. But oh my god, does it get kind of ridiculous after this. With the last of the doo-doo bosses out of the way, I went to the Dark Lake Catacombs next, where I had to dodge the onslaught of a large gaping mouth, aka your mother, before standing face to face with Jory, Elder Inquisitor. That's right boys, I finally remembered to record the fucking jury fight. God, the bar is in hell. It was pretty anticlimactic when I finally got here, though, because the fight lasted about as long as I did in my first time on the stair climber at the gym. Yeah, you thought I was gonna say something else, didn't you? You dirty little slob, get your mind out the damn gutter. I will have you know that on this channel, I like to keep things professional. Sure, man. Tasteful.
Oh, sure, Jam.
And thought-provoking. Yeah, who the hell am I kidding? My videos are probably being shown to political prisoners in Guantanamo Bay to induce mental After clearing the godforsaken abyssal woods, I made it to the top of Midra's manse and bullied this decrepit old man who was standing where Midra should have been for some reason. Upon further investigation, it seems as though that decrepit old man was actually Midra himself. I got catfished, man. That's kind of fucked up. But I'm happy I died on my first attempt because I was playing horribly anyway, and that's not the kind of gameplay I want to showcase in my videos on bosses I claim to be good at and/or enjoy fighting. There's a reason why I don't care about how the gameplay looks in any of my Materia fights. I hate that boss, and I just want to get her out of the damn way. Midra, on the other hand, is much more deserving of my time and effort, and I hope that in the next major FromSoft title, they look to him for inspiration for the major boss fights. I'd much rather have like 50 or 60 really good bosses like this than have 400 with only like 30 or 40 that are just non-filler fights, you know? Now, the one thing that surprised me is that I could not get a stagger for the longest time against Midra. I guess bro must have finally had enough of getting tossed around by motherfuckers walking in here with 2 metal balls attached to their fists and just having their way with him. And the other thing about the fight is that I will hold my hand up and say that no matter what way I looked at it, I could not figure out how to, quote, break Midra using the Greatsword. He really had my number in this fight. You know, I couldn't just waltz in and bully him like I've done to almost every other boss in the video thus far. The DLC bosses don't really offer that much time and space to just spam Ashes of War. Midra made me earn the win, and I don't have a problem with that. This series isn't about walking through a fog wall and one-shotting whatever's in front of me. If I wanted to do that, it would just be pointless and kind of boring to watch in my opinion. If I were you guys, I wouldn't want to watch someone sit there and run 17 calculations and constantly have to reset a boss fight for the most optimal attack opening. That's some cornball shit. And we don't do cornball shit around here. As I approached the end of the run, I grabbed a couple more talismans that I would need for the final stretch, starting with the two-handed sword talisman and then the two-headed turtle talisman. Then, I headed up Jagged Peak and slayed some dragons, and somehow found a homeless guy who wandered up here. Bale was tearing my body and soul apart in this run, mostly because I still haven't learned the ins and outs of the fight that well compared to most other people. But luckily for me, the homeless guy I found on the mountain earlier seemed to have beef with Bale and was willing to help me out. With the homeless man distracting Bale by panhandling and asking if he could hold $1, I had the opportunity to get up near his tail and land a fully charged Ash of War, staggering Bale and leading me to eventually get to his head after about 7 business days so I could land another Ash of War because I thought that would be cooler than taking a riposte. Phase 2 Bale is quite the spectacle and doesn't really leave many opportunities to charge Ordovis' Vortex. I recognize that 2 fights in a row are kinda cop-outs on my end, but hey man, these DLC bosses are not to be trifled with. When I mentioned earlier there are still things about this fight I have yet to learn, I was specifically thinking about this. Ultimately, it was Egon who once again came up huge and was like the Scottie Pippen to my Michael Jordan. Right when I needed him the most, he took aggro from Bale and gave me just enough time to land the staggering blow onto his tail, leaving him stunned and wide open to the killing blow with Ordovis' Vortex. Egon is batshit crazy, but that's why I love the guy. Bro is out here doing it strictly for the love of the game. With all optional DLC bosses defeated, the final stretch was approaching. The first step was to traverse the ancient ruins of Rao, which I have a funny feeling was designed after taking inspiration from a circa 2016 Minecraft edit. I don't know why, but in my head, this place just looks like a Minecraft build. I can't explain it. Once I made it to the Church of the Bud, I played around with my talismans, chugged my slurp juice, buffed myself up, and then proceeded to give Ramana a first attempt ass whooping for my very first time. I don't know what type of shit I was on in this run, but everything was bass-ackwards for me. Bosses that I normally dumpster like Mesmer and Midra gave me a hard time, and bosses that normally pissed me off like Ramana got their asses kicked. I put on the two-handed talisman for this fight specifically because of how mobile Ramana is. I knew most of my damage windows would mainly consist of things other than my Ash of War, and when I could use an L2, it would probably be an uncharged attack. Just because I beat her on the first try doesn't mean it was pretty. I still got clipped plenty of times, and there were a couple instances where I was perhaps peeing my pants at the sight of my health bar rapidly approaching 0. But in the face of scarlet rot and questionable sexual arousal, onward I pushed, methodically chipping away at Ramana's health bar and somehow not getting a stagger. Like seriously, my knowledge base of the boss's stagger meter and poise must be completely faulted because I feel like I definitely should have gotten one by now. But in the end, it didn't matter because Ordovis' Greatsword is simply unmatched, and I will simply simp for this weapon until the day that I die. With all that out the way, I could finally take my focus away from fighting and shift it back to a more civilized hobby and pastime. Arson, and Limb. Even the enemies here are no match for the power of Ordovis' Greatsword. Pay no mind to my health bar, that was completely user error on my end. And yeah, I fucking died to Divine Bird Feathers, I admit it. If you stop watching the video now, I wouldn't even blame you, honestly. Thankfully, the Letta and allies fight went a hell of a lot smoother than the exploration itself. The Ash of War completely bullies NPCs, and they honestly just don't stand a chance against this weapon. With Dryleaf Dane dead, and Letta led to an early grave, it was time for the final battle and the final test for Ordovis' Greatsword. I leveled up one last time before clearing my head of all my past victories and defeats in order to get into the proper headspace for Consort Radahn. I've beaten Consort several times at this point, but this time felt different. This was my favorite weapon in all of Elden Ring, a weapon that's been there for me in my highest of highs and my lowest of lows. After purging my thoughts of anything other than the moveset of my upcoming opponent, there was left but one thought, one singular mantra. It's go time. I stood outside the fog wall, initiated my buff sequence for the final time, and walked through the fog, where magic unfolded before my eyes. This time, there will be no yapping. I will simply sit back and let you enjoy the gameplay. I fucking beat Consort Radahn on my first try. No, I will not elaborate any further. Well, that was a heck of a way to end another installment in the Breaking Elden Ring series. I had a blast using Ordovis' Greatsword, and hopefully this video will inspire you to hop back on Elden Ring and experience what this weapon has to offer if you haven't ever used it before. If you like what you saw from me today, make sure to hit the subscribe button for future uploads and so you can enjoy the occasional live stream that I do. I've got some plans for the future to expand to new games and so forth, so stay tuned for that. That's all from me for today. I've been Flock of Turtles. You've been amazing, and I'll see you in the next one.